Now let's discuss the general characteristics of a prokaryotic cell. Well, the example of a prokaryotic cell is a bacteria. We are going to discuss the general characters and then we will discuss the structure of a bacterial cell in detail. So let's start with the nuclear material first. When we talk about the nuclear material, then definitely we are talking about DNA, right? And in this case, DNA is naked. DNA is what? It is naked. Now, a naked DNA means that the DNA is not associated with histone proteins. Well, I will just tell you in brief what happens. We have histone proteins, right? 8 histone protein units. And around this histone protein units, DNA coils itself, which forms a structure, a unit that we call as nucleosome. We call it as nucleosome. So, in case of a prokaryotic cell, DNA is naked. It means that DNA, it is not associated with histone proteins, right? And this DNA which is there, in this case, we call it as nucleoid. What do we call the DNA that is there in case of a prokaryotic cell? We call it as a nucleoid, or sometimes you can also call it as genophore. And since it is equivalent to single naked chromosome, we can also call it as prochromosome. We can also call it as prochromosome. So these are the names for the naked DNA that is there in case of a prokaryotic cell. That is, we can call it as a nucleoid, we can call it as genophore, we can also call it as prochromosome. Why we call it as prochromosome? Because the DNA which is naked, it is just equivalent to single naked chromosome. Then let's talk about the cell wall. If we talk about the cell wall, then bacteria and cyanobacteria, that is blue-green algae, they have a cell wall. But mycoplasma is an exception. Mycoplasma, or you can also call it as PPLO. What is PPLO? PPLO is pleuropneumonia-like organisms. So they don't have a cell wall, but bacterial cell, it has a cell wall. Then let's talk about flagella and fimbriae. What happens in case of flagella? Flagella is single-stranded. In case of a prokaryotic cell, we have a single-stranded flagella which helps in locomotion. Then fimbriae, or you can say pili, right? There is a very slight difference between these two terms. We will discuss later when we will talk about the bacterial cell. But remember that fimbriae or pili, they actually help in the attachment when there is sexual reproduction, a special sexual reproduction that we call as conjugation. Right? So these structures, they don't help in locomotion, but they are just helping in attachment during reproduction. That special sexual reproduction is known as conjugation. It is known as what? Conjugation. Then some bacteria, they are autotrophic, means they prepare their own food. So there are photosynthetic thylakoids also that are present, right? Then membrane lined cell organelles, they are absent in case of a prokaryotic cell. Means if we talk about endoplasmic reticulum, if we talk about Golgi apparatus, right, and if we talk about lysosomes, then these membrane lined cell organelles, they are absent in case of a prokaryotic cell. Then typical true vacuoles or sap vacuoles are not there. There are gas vacuoles that may be there. Gas vacuoles are there. There are no true vacuoles or true sap vacuoles. Then ribosomes. Ribosomes are generally 70S type. In a prokaryotic cell, the type of ribosomes is generally what? It is 70S. They don't have 80S ribosomes, right? Then they have a one envelope system. Since membrane lined cell organelles, they are absent. So prokaryotic cell has a one envelope system. Then DNA content is low in case of a prokaryotic cell. As I told you that the DNA, the naked DNA that is there in case of a prokaryotic cell, it is equivalent to a single naked chromosome. So as a whole, the DNA content is low in case of a prokaryotic cell. Then the respiratory enzymes, they are, they are present near the cell membrane. The respiratory enzymes are there linked with the cell membrane. So these are the general characteristics of a prokaryotic cell, right? I'll just summarize them as whole. The DNA is naked, which we call as nucleoid, genophore or prochromosome. You can see in the image how this DNA is there. There is no well organized nucleus within which this DNA is there in case of a eukaryotic cell. But it is a prokaryotic cell, so DNA is naked, there is no nucleus, no well organized nucleus, and this DNA is equivalent to single naked chromosome most probably. That is why we call it as a prochromosome. Okay. Then the cell wall, it is there in bacteria and cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is blue-green algae, but in case of mycoplasma and PPLO, that is pleuropneumonia-like organisms, this cell wall is not there, it is absent. Then flagella is single-stranded in case of a prokaryotic cell, and this helps in locomotion. If you talk about fimbriae and pili, they help in attachment, for example, during a special reproduction that we call as conjugation. Right? Photosynthetic thylakoids are there in case of the bacteria that are autotrophic, means that prepare their own food. Then membrane-lined cell organelles such as endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, lysosomes, right, they are absent. Since they are absent, means there is one envelope system in case of a prokaryotic cell. And true vacuoles are not there, instead there are gas vacuoles, and ribosomes are of 70S type, right. Then DNA content as a whole is quite low, and respiratory enzymes are associated with cell membrane. So just remember the general characteristics of a prokaryotic cell, these 10 general characters that we have discussed. Now we are going to discuss a complete structure of a bacterial cell in detail, in which you will actually have a clear understanding of all these characteristics.